Johnny Manziel, a Heisman winner set to become the next great quarterback, a beloved college player in the state of Texas till this day. Love him or hate him, he was undoubtedly the most exciting and arguably the best quarterback in Texas A&M history. But how did Johnny Manziel go from Johnny Football to out of the NFL in just 2 years? What happened to him? Why did he not succeed in the NFL? We're going to talk about that and much more in this video, but first, let's start from the beginning. Manziel was born in Tyler, Texas on December 6, 1992 to Michelle and Paul Manziel. They later moved to Carrollville, Texas around the time Manziel was in the 6th grade, but in order to grasp the full concept on Manziel's background, we need to go back one more step, or at least two, and introduce Manziel's great-grandfather, Bobby Joe Manziel, who was a bantamweight boxer born in Lebanon who sparred and became friends with heavyweight champion Jack Dempsey. Now, this relationship became very important once Bobby hung up the gloves because Bobby would move to East Texas in search of oil. Bobby would then ask Dempsey for $400 so he could drill for oil, and he indeed found plenty of oil, and so many would believe that Johnny Manziel's family was extremely wealthy. But we now know that Johnny Manziel's father was a 6-day-a-week hard-working man in the car selling business. I say that to say this: it has not been stated how much money the Manziel family still has when it comes to the oil money, but it has been stated by Paul Manziel himself that it's not Garth Brooks money, but it's a lot of money. And with that, the next question is, did Johnny Manziel have direct access to his money while he was at Texas A&M? And that is a question that will be answered once we dive deep into his college career, but right now let's take a look at Johnny Manziel's high school years. Johnny Manziel attended Tybee High School and initially wanted to be a baseball star until he became burnt out on the game itself. So then he switched over to football. Wanting to be on the field any way that he could, he initially played wide receiver. It would not be until his sophomore year that he would start at quarterback. He would take jumps each year at the position, throwing for 1,109 yards, 11 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions that sophomore season, adding 835 yards on the ground with 15 touchdowns. As a sophomore, he threw 2,782 yards, had 19 touchdowns, and only 5 interceptions with 1,529 yards rushing with 33 rushing touchdowns. And fast forward to his senior season, he would showcase the fact that he could become a dynamic passer, throwing for 3,609 yards with 44 total touchdowns, and also rushing for 1,676 yards with 30 rushing touchdowns. Manziel had more rushing touchdowns than passing touchdowns in high school, which put everyone on notice when it came to his dual threat ability. People traveled from all over to watch Johnny Manziel play. During his senior season, he was so good he was named Mr. Texas Football that year, and coming out of high school, Manziel was ranked as a 4-star recruit by 24/7 Sports, but remained a 3-star everywhere else. After receiving offers from schools such as Baylor, Oregon, he ultimately decided to take his talents to Texas A&M. After redshirting in 2011, Manziel was working towards becoming the starting QB for the Aggies, but that redshirt season was not a walk in the park for Johnny Manziel. Before he became the Johnny Football that we all knew, he would have a lot of self-doubt, and before his Heisman campaign would even start, Johnny Manziel would find himself in some trouble. In June 2012, Johnny Manziel was arrested and jailed for getting into a fight and having a fake ID card. He was charged with 3 misdemeanors, including disorderly conduct, failure to identify, and possessing a false identification card. Manziel reached a plea agreement in July 2013 in which he pleaded guilty to failing to identify himself. He received a $2,000 fine and had to pay court costs, but he had his other 2 charges dropped.
It all kind of came to a halt when I got arrested. Going out to Northgate and College Station and drinking too much and blacking out and waking up in handcuffs. When that instance happened, it was this meeting with Coach Sumlin and my mom and my dad, and it was like, you either figure this out today or your ass is out of here. And when that happened, my family moved to College Station. Wow. And they moved in my backyard. And I pretty much moved back in with my mom and my dad. And that's when George Whitfield came into my life. Mm-hmm. And I went, my mom sent me to San Diego with all the money they probably had saved up for their little saving stuff and sent me out there to work with this guy, and they trusted him. And when I came back, I left before that trip and getting arrested, 4th on the depth chart. Below the freshman who came in, below the 2 other guys that were above me in the class. And in 11 days, when I got back and we started training camp, I was named the starter and handed the keys to the Texas A&M University football team.
But the Aggie season did not exactly start the way that they wanted to, losing to Florida 20-17. Now, I will say this. After that, though, they hit the ground running, beating SMU, South Carolina State, Arkansas, Ole Miss, and Louisiana Tech, until they faced off against an LSU team in which they were leading but ultimately lost 24-19. But that would be the last loss of the season for Texas A&M, and they would soon go on to have their biggest win of the season. This would be the game that would put Johnny Football on the map, going for 253 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, and 92 rushing yards. He would end this season with 3,419 passing yards, 24 touchdowns on just 8 interceptions. He added an additional 1,181 yards rushing with 19 rushing touchdowns. This would lead to Johnny Manziel winning the Heisman Trophy, becoming the first freshman to do so. And on top of all of that, in his last game that year in the Cotton Bowl against Oklahoma, it seemed like they put everything together. He threw for 287 yards, 2 touchdowns, and just 1 interception. But the most insane stat of that night would be the 229 yards rushing with an added 2 rushing touchdowns. Johnny Manziel that entire game was running wherever he wanted to. Johnny Manziel and the Aggies got a huge win to cap off the season, and in Manziel's words, this is where Johnny Football was born. So if you include the Iron Bowl, that's over 5,000 yards of total offense. In just one season, he broke the SEC record with those 5,116 yards of total offense, a record held by Cam Newton at the time with 4,327. Johnny Manziel left no doubt that season. His next year playing college football would also be a success. However, August 28, 2013, Manziel was suspended for the first half of Texas A&M season opener against Rice by the NCAA. Manziel violated a NCAA rule which prevented student athletes from benefiting from their name, image, and likeness at that time. Right now, currently, players can do this, so just keep in mind that what I'm about to tell you guys would have been perfectly fine by today's standards. But at that time, the speculation was that Johnny Manziel received payment for signing autographs. However, the NCAA couldn't find enough evidence to show that he did indeed receive payment. So the NCAA came out and said that even though Johnny Manziel violated the name, image, and likeness rules at that time, he didn't receive any money from the signing. So that's why Johnny Manziel was only suspended for the first half of that game. But the question soon became, why would a guy who comes from an oil money family need to sign autographs to make money? Because many at that time still believed that he did take some form of payment. Well, it would be sometime after Johnny Manziel was done playing football, but he would admit in a 2021 interview with Barstool Sports to accepting up to $33,000. That number could be more, could be less. I'm not exactly sure because I continue to see different numbers pop up, but at the end of the day, he did take some form of payment for signing those autographs during his redshirt freshman season at Texas A&M. Around the time of the 2013 BCS championship game,
Guy comes up to behind me, he's like, yo, how would you want to make $3 grand? I'll turn around, like, fuck yeah, bro. You know, may or may not have gone back to this guy's condo and signed probably 10,000 pieces.
That's
so
funny.
I'm signing these autographs, and this other guy who's like bringing the pictures over, he's like, yo, you're getting fucking ripped off. Here's this guy's number. Hit him up. He'll give you 30 grand. And I'm like, Fuck yeah, man.
For those of you with their calculator out, that's $33,000.
And I know what you're thinking, well, that doesn't explain the reason why you would risk your football career over money you already had. Well, let me introduce you to Nate Fitch. In the Netflix documentary on Johnny Manziel called Untold Johnny Football, Nate Fitch is presented to us as Manziel's old best friend, business partner, and the mastermind behind the oil money story. Apparently, they used the story as a cover-up to mask the fact that Johnny Manziel didn't have that much money at all, so when they received money from signing autographs, it would be assumed that Johnny Manziel already had all of this money. They used that money to fuel their party habits when they wanted to travel, different things like that. And even though this was the case, Johnny Manziel was able to have yet another great season, throwing for 4,114 yards, 37 touchdown passes with 13 interceptions. His rushing numbers would take a dip from around 1,400 or so, and now he would only have 759 rushing yards, but for a quarterback, that's still pretty good. He would score 9 rushing touchdowns as well, ending his career at Texas A&M with a total of 9,989 yards and 93 scores. And with that being said, it was time for Johnny Manziel to go to the NFL. Johnny Manziel will go on to get drafted by the Cleveland Browns 22nd overall after such a great college career. Someone may question why Manziel would not go higher, but his height as well as his off-field antics were a concern for some teams. And at that time, Johnny Manziel was the shortest QB drafted in the first round, but some thought that he would still be a superstar in the league regardless.
9 National Football League teams that needed a quarterback last night passed on Johnny Manziel, starting with the Houston Texans, who will forever regret passing on Johnny Manziel. And in a minute, I will go right down the list of teams that will forever regret passing on Johnny Manziel, who pretty soon will change football life in Cleveland, Ohio. One day, I am predicting, Johnny Manziel will become even bigger in the city of Cleveland than his buddy and business partner LeBron James ever was in the city of Cleveland. One day, the passing connection of Johnny Manziel to Josh Gordon.
Manziel's first notable action with the Cleveland Browns would be in a preseason loss against Washington. He would throw up the bird and get fined $12K. The season would see Brian Hoyer get the nod as the starting QB, while Johnny Manziel would chill on the sidelines. It would not be until week 13 of that season that Johnny Manziel would enter the game against the Buffalo Bills. Manziel went 5 for 8 for 63 yards and scored his first NFL touchdown on a 10-yard rush in the fourth quarter. And even though the Browns lost 26-10 with Manziel on the field, it gave the Cleveland Brown fans hope until the following week. Manziel made his first NFL start in the Browns Week 15 game against the Cincinnati Bengals. Manziel completed 10 of 18 passes for 80 yards and 2 interceptions for a passer rating of 27.3 while being sacked 3 times. The Browns lost 30-0, and in the following week, the Browns would play the Carolina Panthers, and Johnny Manziel would suffer a hamstring injury, so that ultimately ended the season for Johnny Football. Now, with that being said, many would just chunk this up to Johnny Manziel simply not being cut out for the NFL. But even with that being said, guys who are not necessarily star QBs seem to find themselves on a roster in the NFL and able to maintain no jobs for a very long time. So Johnny Manziel knew why he did not perform his best in his first season in the NFL, and the truth of the matter is he simply was not focused. Partying and hanging out in Vegas, hanging out with whatever famous person that he could find at that time, he was more attached to the life football provided for him over the actual game itself. So the following year would start out with an attempt from him to make a huge change. He would spend 10 weeks in rehab to get clean, move to a better community. He even moved this old high school coach, Julius Scott, in with him, and I assume this was to serve as a life coach. It seemed that Johnny Manziel was finally going to clean up his act and focus on balling out, studying more, and getting his mind right, getting his body right for the season. At least that's what we thought, but now we know, due to the Untold documentary on Johnny Manziel, that he did not watch a lick of film.
Their GM's calling me going, he doesn't watch tape. I'm like, well, he's got to watch some tape. It's like, EB, his iPad hours is 0.00.
0.
And to also make matters worse, he was ruled out the rest of the preseason with reoccurring pain in his right elbow. So the season would begin, and some weeks Johnny Manziel would start, some weeks he would not. But around the time that he was named the starter for the remainder of the season, a video dropped of him partying in Texas. Some people believe that this was around the time of his bye week, so Johnny Manziel was back at it again. No one knows when he truly fell back into his old habits, but either way, Johnny Manziel was demoted to the third string until Josh McCown suffered a season-ending collarbone injury. Manziel will remain the starter until the last game of the season, where he sat out due to a concussion, but reports circulated that he was in Las Vegas instead of in Cleveland with the team that weekend. The team confirmed that Manziel did miss a scheduled check-in on the morning of the last game of the season, and as soon as they could, they cut Johnny Manziel from the team. At that time as well, he was being investigated on domestic violence charges that he would later reach an agreement with the prosecutors to dismiss. All of the partying, all of the drinking, the lack of focus soon became way too much for the Cleveland Browns to handle, as well as the entire NFL. His father also took a similar stance, stating this in 2016. He's a druggie. It's not a secret that he's a druggie. Paul Manziel said, "I don't know what to say other than my son is a druggie and he needs help. He just hasn't sought it yet. Hopefully he doesn't die before he comes to his senses. That's about all you can say. I don't know what else to say." He would also say, "I had him in rehab and he escaped and the doctors let him go, and that is a whole other story. We've done everything that we can do. Life goes on. You can't just chase someone that's not willing to listen. The story is not going to change. It's the same. We're so far past that," he said. That was years ago. We're so far past what everybody thinks we're past. People are ignorant. It's just a horrible story. That's all there is to it. And just simply judging off of these comments right here, it seems as if the family tried to do everything that they could in order to help their son. However, I believe that a lot of times when people have addictions or some type of issue, it seems that it's never enough. And the problem usually does not get solved until that person hits a new low and have some type of realization. And it was at this point that Johnny Manziel reached the lowest point of his life. He began to use cocaine and other drugs on a daily basis, and at this time, which is January 2016, he was 215 pounds, and by September of that same year, he was a whopping 175 pounds.
I was 210 pounds when I left Cleveland. I was 170 pounds sitting in Vegas that August, that September, October, whatever it was later in that year. How you lose 40 pounds? You're on a strict diet of blow.
Oh, I was about to say, you don't want either one of them. I mean, you lose 40 pounds in that length of time, you on crack.
Or Ozempic.
It got so bad for Johnny Manziel that he even got close to taking his own life. But this was the low that I was talking about. The suicide attempt gave Johnny Manziel a new perspective on life, and despite everything that happened with his father and different things like that, Johnny Manziel returned to Texas where he began his recovery. And in that documentary, Paul Manziel stated this: "It's been a long, long road, and I don't know if it's been great or it's been bad. That's kind of still up for debate, but we're blessed and he's still with us and we can mend all the fences still." I think Johnny's got a lot better days coming than what he's had. But let's fast forward. A few years will go by and Johnny Manziel will go on to have stints in the CFL with the Hamilton Tiger Cats in 2017 and the Montreal Alouettes in 2018. He joined the AAF with the Memphis Express in 2019, and he also had a stint with the Fan Control League in 2020. And at this point in Johnny Manziel's life, he's just simply enjoying life, enjoying being alive, and not necessarily being hooked into the limelight of being Johnny Football. And I know a lot of people believe that Johnny Manziel was simply not cut out for the NFL, but not everyone is. But Manziel, in my opinion, had enough talent to at the very minimum stay on the NFL roster for more than just 2 seasons. But at that time in his life, he simply could not get out of his own way. But it looked looks like Johnny Manziel is maturing just a little bit, but even more important than that, it looks like he is safe. He's been doing interviews on podcasts such as Club Shay Shay and other things, and so we'll see what's next on the horizon for Johnny Manziel, but I'm glad that the guy is safe. So with that being said, let me know what you guys think about this topic. Let me know what you think about this video, and until then, don't forget to like, comment, and also subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.